Hey guys, it's Ray and Andrew here. We're CPAs in the Mooresville, Lake Norman area, and today we wanted to talk a little bit about how long to keep your tax records. We do taxes for a lot of small business owners and individual clients, and Ray, what can you tell us about how long to keep records?
So what you want to do is, so every tax return has what's called a statute of limitations on it, right? Mm-hmm. So a statute of limitations that says how far back you can go, you can amend your tax return to get a tax refund, or how far back the IRS can look to assess additional tax. And generally, that statute of limitation is 3 years after you file a tax return. So for most clients, right, it's going to be that 3 years that you're going to want to make sure and keep your records for either being able to say, oops, I had a mistake, I need to go back and amend, or, or for the IRS to come to you and say, hey, we think something happened in this 1 year, we need to see your records, we need you to prove these expenses, things like that. So for the most people out there, it's going to be 3 years after you file a tax return is the statute of limitations.
So are there circumstances when you would want to keep it longer than 3 years?
There are, right? So if you had what's called worthless securities that you disposed of, or if you wrote off bad debts on a personal tax return, you're going to want to keep those records for 7 years.
Okay.
Now, there's also if you omitted income, gross income, greater than 25% of your tax return, then you need to keep your records for 6 years, right? So what happens is that statute of limitations that the IRS can go back and look at your taxes is 3 years, right? But if during that audit they find where you have omitted gross income that equals 25% of your tax on your tax return, then they can extend that statute of limitation back 6 years.
Gotcha.
Right? So I know it's hard to say if you knew you omitted, 25% of your gross income, but if they catch that, then they can go back 6 years. So, depending on your income and how it comes in, you may want to keep your stuff 6 years. Now, also, if you file a fraudulent tax return, because when you admit greater than 25%, did you fraudulently do it? Well, if you fraudulently did it, then your tax return is open forever. Yeah. Right? So you got to keep your records forever if you committed fraud on your tax return.
Gotcha. So for most people who are just a W-2 straightforward return, 3 years probably.
3 years is probably pretty good, right? Gotcha. If you're a W-2 with some Schedule A deductions, things like that, you're probably safe keeping it, 3 years after it's filed.
Gotcha.
And then,
And what about people who like buy and sell property, real estate? What about those guys?
That's a whole different animal. Like if you own real estate, like a rental property or something like that, then you more or less want to keep those records until you actually dispose of it.
Gotcha.
So let's say you bought a piece of rental real estate in 2000, right? And then you're depreciating it and things like that over the years. And then 2010, you do a 1031 exchange for another piece of property. And then say 2020, you finally dispose of that piece of property. Well, you're going to need records all the way from 2000 to 2020 on hand. You're going to want to keep records on all of that.
Depreciation and the 1031.
Yeah, because you got to make sure and prove your depreciation, then your basis and the 1031 exchange basis, all of that you're going to have to prove. So you'll have to keep all those records for at least the 3 years after you dispose that property. I personally would probably keep it another 6 after you dispose that property, because it's probably going to be a pretty big transaction. And if anything ever comes up to question, you want to be able to prove it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's so. Kind of just depends on how complicated your return is, what you have going on. But for the vast majority of people, maybe 3 years is a good rule. 7 years is a good rule of thumb. But if you guys have questions on it, definitely give us a call. I appreciate you going through that with us.
Absolutely.
Again, this is Ray and Andrew with REH CPA.